Turning back, many slaves only saw rocks and heavy shards of ice raining on them. Sunny was one of the few that remained upright and saw it clearly. Something massive came crashing down. It fell right between the caravan and the mountain wall. It looked like a lump of dirty snow. Once the creature unfurled its long limbs and rose. It has multi-jointed hands, 2 of them, each ending with a set of horrifying claws. The thing that at first glance looked like dirty snow turned out to be its fur, yellowish gray and ragged. The creature moved, slashing its claws in his general direction. But Sunny was one step ahead. Without wasting a single moment, he jumped sideways. Those sharp claws, each as long as a sword. They sliced through the broad-shouldered man. The scholarly slave pointed at his shackles with a face as pale as a ghost. Sunny thought this whole situation was literally not right. The spell had its own set of rules. There were rules for what type of creatures could appear in any given nightmare, too. Nightmare creatures had their own hierarchy, from mindless beasts to monsters, followed by demons, devils, tyrants, terrors and, finally, mythical titans, also known as calamities. However, the creature had clearly just created a lesser version of itself, an ability that only belonged to tyrants. Unfair or not, there was only one person now who could save Sunny himself. The broad-shouldered man, what was left of him, slowly rose. Sunny jumped forward, grabbing onto the slackened chain. Stepping close, he threw the chain around the monster's shoulders and pulled, pinning its hands to its body. The good thing was, the monster couldn't move its hands now. The bad thing was, the chain he used to immobilize it was short, leaving almost no distance between them. "You too!" Sunny screamed at his 2 fellow slaves. "Pull on that chain." The shifty slave and the scholar understood what he was thinking, started to move. Grabbing the chain from the opposite direction, they pulled as hard as they could. The monster bulged its muscles, trying to break free. The chain creaked, caught on the bone spikes, as though slowly breaking apart. Immediately, Sunny threw his hands in the air and caught the creature's neck with the short chain, connecting his shackles together. Then he circled the monster with a quick step and pulled, ending up back to back with it. Now, using his own back as a lever and the weight of his whole body to pull the shackles down. He pulled down with all his might, feeling the monster's body pressing against him. Now it was just a question of what would break first, the chain or the monster itself. Sunny pulled down with as much force as he could muster. His wounded back, wrists, and muscles were pierced by the bone spikes. And then, finally, Sunny felt the monster's body go limp. A moment later, a faintly familiar voice rang in the air. "You have slain a dormant beast, Mountain King's larva." "You have slain a dormant beast, Mountain King's larva." Sunny fell to his knees, breathless and tired. And yet, he was exhilarated. The satisfaction of killing the larva was so vast. He forgot to not receiving a memory, a special item tied to Dream Realm inhabitants' essence. A few moments later, he forced himself to come back to his senses and looked around, trying to ascertain the situation. The larva was dead. The shifty slave and the scholar untangled the chain. What pulled Sunny's attention was the fact that several of the maimed bodies were starting to move. The tyrant Mountain King, presumably, was hidden from sight by the bright glow of the bonfire. An angry bellow could also be heard, indicating that some of the soldiers were still fighting the monstrosity off. One after another, 4 more corpses slowly rose to their feet. One of the beasts turned its head toward the 3 slaves and gnashed its fangs. Sunny tried to find weapons. He simply wrapped a length of chain around the knuckles and raised his fists. However, a nimble figure moved past him, and a sharp sword flashed in the air. The monster, beheaded with one strike, fell gracelessly onto the ground. Standing there calmly was the handsome young soldier who had once offered him water. The soldier gave Sunny a key to shackles and urged him to save himself. Shifty was waving his hands in the air, trying to get his attention. Despite Shifty's previous threats to kill him, Sunny didn't leave a fellow slave in chains. He hurried over to the other 2 slaves and unlocked their shackles. Shifty celebrated his freedom, while the soldier fought the larvae. Scholar advised against running due to the necessity of the bonfire to survive the night. Sunny did not say anything, knowing that Scholar was right. The bonfire was still their only lifeline in this frozen hell. 2 of the 3 larvae were already dead. The third one was missing an arm, but still trying to tear its opponent apart. The young soldier moved around it with a graceful fluidity. At this point, the third larva was dead, and the young soldier was nowhere to be seen. He had probably gone to join the fight at the other side of the bonfire. Sunny was sure that Mountain King would not be satisfied with killing just most of the slaves. Even if the Awaki, it was tough to fight with a tyrant. But if he wanted to live, Sunny decided to take a look at the beast. Sunny was off to face against a nightmare creature. And not any creature, but one of the 5th category, a dread, fearsome tyrant. On the other side of the bonfire, most of the slaves were already dead. A few soldiers weren't going to last long. The tyrant picked up a dead slave and torn it in half. Mountain King chewed, streams of blood flowing down its chin. Sunny was thinking, measuring his chances of survival. The young soldier tossed a burning piece of wood at the monster. Sunny found he needed distraction, using a force of nature, gravity as a weapon. The young hero's foolish bravado presented an opportunity. Sunny told Shifty and Scholar to get closer to the wagon quickly with him. Sunny instructed them to remove the wedges from the wagon's rear wheels and push it forward. When he told them to do, Hero was weaving between the creature's limbs to distract it. Now everything depended on his hand-to-eye coordination and luck. Turning to Shifty and Scholar at the right time, he screamed and now. Then, Sunny picked up a sizable length of chain. Sunny concentrated on the weight of the chain in his hands, the distance between him and the tyrant. Gathering all of his strength, Sunny spun and threw the chain in the air. The loop opened as it flew, closing in on the position of the fight between Hero and the tyrant. Sunny's plan was to pull on the chain and tighten it around the monster's ankle. Once one of the tyrant's feet landed in the trap, he could do it. In the last moment, Mountain King suddenly flinched back. Instead of falling on the ground, the chain loop landed perfectly around its neck. A second later it tightened, acting as an iron noose. Moments later, the wagon would roll off the cliff, pulling the tyrant down with it. Sunny looked back to make sure, and instantly turned even pale. Shifty and Scholar did manage to remove the wedges and were now desperately pushing it to the edge of the road. However, the wagon was rolling very slowly. He turned to the tyrant, panicking. The creature, surprised by the sudden weight pressing down on its neck, was already raising its hands to tear the chain apart. In the next second, Hero crashed into one of the tyrant's legs, throwing it off balance. Sunny was already running to the wagon, pushing with all the strength alongside. The wagon sped up a little, but was still rather slow in reaching the cliff's edge. The tyrant finally got a hold of the chain tied around its neck, ready to free itself. Now whether they lived or not was just a question of which thing would happen first.